I didn't call the police because I was scared. I called them because I finally understood why the basement light had been turning on by itself for 3 weeks. When the dispatcher asked me if someone was in my house, I looked at the open cellar door and realized the honest answer was, I don't know how long he's been there. The house sat on the edge of a small, dying town in western Pennsylvania, the kind of place where most people my age were either retired or planning to be. I was 56, recently divorced, and looking for something cheaper, quieter, and far away from everything that had gone wrong in my life. The realtor called it a fixer with character. I called it affordable. It had been empty for almost a year. That should have been my first warning. The place was old but solid. 2 stories, a narrow front porch, a sloped backyard that disappeared into a line of trees, and a stone cellar with a door that looked like it had been cut out of another century and glued onto the house as an afterthought. The previous owner had passed away. No family wanted it. No one fought over it. That should have been my second warning. The first week was quiet. Too quiet, but I liked that. After 30 years of a loud marriage, silence felt like medicine. I slept better. I cooked simple meals. I sat on the porch in the evenings and listened to nothing but wind and insects and the distant sound of trucks on the highway. It was on the 9th night that I noticed the basement light. I had gone down there earlier to look for a box of tools I thought the previous owner might have left behind. The cellar was unfinished, concrete walls, old shelves, and a single naked bulb hanging from a wire. When I came back upstairs, I remember turning the light off. I'm careful about things like that. Always have been. Around midnight, I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and saw a thin line of light under the cellar door. I stood there for a long time, convincing myself I was wrong. Then I opened the door and looked down the steps. The light was on. I told myself I must have forgotten. People forget things. Men my age forget things all the time. I went down, turned it off, and went back to bed. 2 nights later, it happened again. Same thing. Same thin line of light. Same uneasy feeling in my stomach. This time, I stood at the top of the stairs and listened before going down. I don't know what I expected to hear. Breathing, maybe, or movement. I heard nothing. The cellar was exactly how I'd left it. I started locking the basement door after that. It didn't help. The first time I found the door unlocked, I blamed the lock. Old house. Old hardware. Easy explanation. I replaced the latch with a new one from the hardware store in town. The second time, I couldn't explain it anymore. I began checking the house every night before bed. Front door, back door, windows, basement. It became a routine, like brushing my teeth or setting the alarm. And for a while, everything stayed exactly how I left it. Then I started noticing things that were harder to ignore. A chair in the basement that I didn't remember moving. A box on a shelf that looked like it had been opened and closed again. Footprints in a thin layer of dust near the far wall that didn't match my shoes. I told myself I was imagining patterns. The human brain is good at that, especially when it's alone. But the smell was harder to explain. It was faint at first. Something stale. Something old. Like damp cardboard and rusted metal. I noticed it in the hallway near the cellar door, then sometimes in the kitchen late at night. It would come and go. I checked for dead animals. I checked the pipes. I checked the garbage. I never thought to check for a person. 3 weeks after I moved in, I woke up around 2:30 in the morning to a sound that didn't belong in a quiet house. A soft, careful step. Not in the hallway. Not on the stairs. Below me. In the basement. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noise. They always have. Then I heard it again. 2 steps this time. Slow. Measured. Like someone trying not to be heard. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I went down to the basement in daylight, with a hammer in my hand like it was going to do me any good. I checked every corner, every shadow, every space behind the shelves. Nothing. But when I came back upstairs, the cellar door didn't close all the way behind me. It stopped, gently, like something was in the way. I opened it again. The stairs were empty. I stood there for a long time before finally closing it and telling myself I was done being paranoid. That lasted until I found the notebook. It was tucked behind a loose brick in the far corner of the cellar wall. I only noticed it because I was finally forcing myself to clean the place out. Old paint cans, broken shelves, a rusted chair that probably dated back to the 40s. When I pulled the brick free, the notebook slid out and hit the floor. It wasn't new. The cover was soft with age, the pages yellowed and brittle. There was no name inside, just dates and times. At first, I thought it was some kind of journal. Then I realized every entry followed the same pattern. A date, a time, and a short note. Light on. Man upstairs asleep. Left kitchen window unlocked. He checks the door before bed. Didn't hear me move. The last entry was from 3 nights ago. The night I heard the footsteps. I sat on the basement steps and read the notebook until my hands started shaking too badly to hold it. Someone had been in my house. Not breaking in. Not sneaking through a window. Living there. Watching me. I checked every room again. I checked the attic. I checked the crawl space behind the water heater. I even checked the space under the stairs that was barely big enough for a child. I didn't find anyone, but I did find something else. A pile of empty food cans behind the shelves in the basement. All the same brand. All the same things I'd been buying since I moved in. Soup, beans, cheap chili, my food. That was when I noticed the light was on again. I hadn't turned it on. I walked back up the stairs, closed the door, and stood in the kitchen for a long time, trying to decide what kind of fear I was feeling. It wasn't panic. It was the slow, sinking realization that whatever had been in my house wasn't gone just because I had found proof of it. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat in the living room with the lights off and the TV on, pretending to watch a show I wasn't really seeing. Every sound made my shoulders tighten. Every shadow felt like it was leaning toward me. Around 1 a.m., the basement light came on. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched the thin line of light appear under the door. Then I heard the latch. Slowly, carefully. The door didn't open. It just clicked like someone testing it. That was when I picked up the phone and called the police. While I was still on the line, the light went off. The dispatcher asked me if I was alone. I told her I didn't know. 2 officers arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the house, the basement, the attic, the yard, the woods behind the house. They didn't find anyone. They told me it was probably a drifter who had gotten in before I moved and left when he realized the place was occupied. I asked them about the notebook. They looked at each other and didn't say much. They told me to stay somewhere else for the night. I did. When I came back the next day, the basement door was open. The notebook was gone. And on the kitchen table, next to my keys, was a single, clean sheet of paper with 5 words written on it. I didn't mean to scare you. I sold the house 3 weeks later. The new owner asked why. I told him the truth. The light in the basement still turns on by itself sometimes. The first thing the detective asked me was whether I had any enemies. I told him no. The second thing he asked was why my house keys were found in a stranger's pocket 3 towns away. That was when I realized someone hadn't just been in my home. Someone had been living my routine. I'm 62 now, and I've lived in the same ranch-style house in northern Ohio for almost 20 years. My wife passed away 5 winters ago, and since then the place has been too quiet, too big, and too full of echoes. But it's home. Every creak in the floor has a reason. Every shadow has a source. Or at least that's what I used to believe. My days are simple. I work part-time at a hardware store, come home around 6, make something easy for dinner, and fall asleep in front of the TV. I lock my doors. I check my windows. I've always been that kind of man. Careful. Predictable. Which is probably why he chose my house. It started with the coffee. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and noticed the coffee pot was warm. Not hot. Just warm. Like someone had turned it off recently. I assumed I'd forgotten to clean it the night before. That happens when you get older. You stop trusting your memory as much as you used to. But I hadn't made coffee in 3 days. I poured it out, rinsed the pot, and didn't think much about it. The next morning, it was warm again. That time I checked the clock. 5:40 a.m. I didn't get up until 6 on workdays. Never had. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic, and told myself there was a simple explanation I just hadn't found yet. There wasn't. Over the next week, little things started changing. The TV volume was lower than I remembered leaving it. A chair at the dining table was pulled out slightly, like someone had sat there and pushed it back in without caring if it lined up. The bathroom light was on when I came home from work, even though I was sure I'd turned it off. None of it was dramatic. None of it was obvious enough to call the police. It was just wrong. The first time I felt genuinely afraid was when I opened my closet and saw my blue work jacket hanging on the wrong hook. That jacket always goes on the left. Always has. It's a stupid habit, but it's mine. That day it was on the right, and my good coat was where the jacket should have been. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at two pieces of fabric like they were evidence in a trial I didn't want to attend. That night I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed, listening to the house breathe. That's the only way I can describe it. The soft ticking of pipes, the distant creak of wood, the low, steady hum of electricity in the walls. And once around 2 a.m., I thought I heard the refrigerator door close. I told myself I was dreaming. The next morning, one of my leftovers was gone. Not the whole container, just half of it. That was the day I changed the locks. It made me feel better for about 12 hours. When I came home from work, the front door was locked. The back door was locked. The windows were closed. Everything looked exactly how I'd left it. But the hallway light was on. I know it was off when I left. I stood in the doorway with my keys in my hand, my heart beating a little faster than it should have. I didn't go in right away. I listened. I waited. Nothing. I walked through the house slowly, checking every room. No one was there. Nothing was missing. Nothing was obviously disturbed. In the bedroom, my bed was made. I never make my bed. That's when the thought finally formed in my head, clear and cold. Someone has a key. Or they had one before I changed the locks. I called a locksmith the next day and had him check everything. He told me the new locks were fine. No signs of tampering. No forced entry. I didn't know whether that made me feel better or worse. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I set up my phone in the hallway, propped up on a shelf, and turned on the camera before I went to bed. It wasn't a real security system. It was just a tired old man hoping to catch proof of something he was starting to feel insane for believing. I locked my bedroom door and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard it, the softest sound of movement. Not footsteps, not exactly, more like someone shifting their weight. My mouth went dry. I didn't move. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't even breathe properly. There was a pause. Then another sound. Quiet, careful click. Like someone touching a door handle without turning it. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. In the morning, I checked the recording. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, at 1:47 a.m., the camera picked up movement. A shadow crossed the hallway. Not fast. Not sneaking. Just walking. The man was tall and thin, wearing dark clothes. His face was mostly turned away from the camera, but I could see enough to know I had never seen him before in my life. He stopped in front of my bedroom door. He stood there for almost a full minute. Then he turned and walked into the kitchen. The recording ended when my phone ran out of storage. I sat at the kitchen table and watched that clip over and over again until my coffee went cold. Then I called the police. They took it seriously, more seriously than I expected. They searched the house, took my statement, and told me to stay with a friend or family member for a few nights. I didn't. I don't know why. Stubbornness, maybe. Or pride. Or the stupid belief that if I stayed, I could somehow take control of the situation again. 2 nights later, my keys went missing. I noticed it in the morning when I was already late for work. I tore the house apart looking for them. Couch cushions, kitchen counters, jacket pockets, the bowl by the door where they always go. Gone. I ended up calling a coworker for a ride. When I came home that evening, The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. I went straight to the kitchen and sat down, my hands shaking just enough that I had to grip the edge of the table. That was when I noticed the note. It was on the fridge, held up by one of my old magnets. Borrowed your keys. Put them back where you always leave them. I didn't read it twice. I ran out of the house and called the police from my car. This time, they stayed longer. They checked the locks again. They dusted for prints. They asked me questions that made my stomach tighten. Did I let anyone stay here recently? Did I rent out a room? Did I know anyone who used to live in this house before me? The answer was no. To all of it. 3 days later, they found my keys. A man had been picked up for sleeping in an abandoned building 2 towns over. He had my keys in his pocket. When they asked him where he got them, he said, "From my house." They showed him my address. He nodded. He told them he'd been living there for months, using the crawl space under the house, coming out at night, learning my routine, watching when I left, watching when I slept. He said he never meant to hurt me. He just needed a place that already felt lived in. They asked him why he took my keys. He said, because he was starting to change things. I sold the house 6 months later. Sometimes, I still wake up in the middle of the night and listen for the sound of someone moving in a place that isn't mine anymore. And sometimes I wonder how long he had really been there before I noticed the coffee was warm. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. The sheriff told me they never found the man who drove the other truck. And my neighbor told me something I still wish I'd never heard. That road doesn't get accidents like that unless someone wants them to happen. I'm 58 now, and until 2 years ago, I thought I understood what it meant to be careful. I drove the speed limit. I locked my doors. I kept my head down. I spent most of my life working maintenance for a small school district in upstate New York, the kind of job where people only notice you when something breaks. After I retired, my wife and I moved out to a quieter area. Nothing fancy, just a modest house near a stretch of rural highway that cut through farmland and trees. The kind of road where you could drive for 10 minutes without seeing another car, especially late at night. That's where the crash happened. I don't remember the impact. I remember the sound. Metal folding in on itself. Glass exploding. Then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with my left arm in a sling and my ribs wrapped so tight it hurt to breathe. The doctor said the other driver ran a stop sign at full speed and hit me square in the side. My car spun into a ditch. If I'd been going a little faster, or if the angle had been a little different, I wouldn't have made it. The other driver was gone. Not dead. Gone. They found the truck abandoned a mile down the road. No blood. No signs of injury. No fingerprints they could use. Just an empty vehicle and a long list of questions. At first, everyone treated it like a hit and run. The sheriff came by the house to ask a few routine questions after I got home. Did I recognize the truck? Had I seen it before? Did I have any enemies? I laughed at that last one. Enemies? I spent my life fixing broken toilets and replacing light fixtures. Who exactly was I supposed to have made angry? But the questions didn't stop. A week later, the sheriff came back. This time, he asked about my routine. Where I went. When I left the house. What time I usually came back. I told him the truth. My life was predictable. Morning coffee. A short drive into town. Groceries. Hardware store. Home before dark. He wrote it all down. Then he asked something that didn't make sense at the time. Do you ever change your route? I told him no. Why would I? He nodded like that answer bothered him. The first strange thing happened 3 nights after that. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of a car engine outside. Not passing by. Idling. Our bedroom window faces the road, but the house sits back far enough that you can't see much at night. Just headlights when someone goes by. This was different. The sound stayed in one place. My wife was asleep. I didn't wake her. I got out of bed and walked to the front window. There was a car parked on the shoulder of the road, just past our driveway. Its lights were off. The engine was running. I stood there for a long time watching. After about 2 minutes, the car pulled away and disappeared down the road. I told myself it was someone checking their phone. or someone who needed to pull over for a minute. It wasn't a big deal. Except it happened again the next night. And the night after that. Always around the same time. Always in almost the same spot. I mentioned it to my wife. She said I was probably just noticing normal things because of the accident. After something like that, your brain looks for danger everywhere. She wasn't wrong. But she wasn't right either. A few days later, I went into town for groceries. On my way back, I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. There are 3 ways to get to my house from town. I always take the same one. That day, I took a different road by accident. I missed a turn and didn't bother correcting it. Halfway home, I saw the same dark-colored sedan pulled off on the side of the road. Engine running. Lights off. This time, I got a good look at it as I passed. There was someone in the driver's seat, just sitting there, watching the road. When I told the sheriff about it, he didn't look surprised. He asked me to describe the car. Then he asked me if I'd noticed anyone following me. I said no. That wasn't entirely true. Once you start thinking about being watched, you start seeing patterns everywhere. A car behind you for 3 turns. A truck that shows up in your mirror more than once. Could all be nothing. Or it could be something. A week later, I found the envelope in my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. On it was written, "Your timing is consistent." That was it. No name. No explanation. Just 4 words that made my stomach feel cold. I showed it to my wife. She told me it was probably a prank. Someone from town messing around. But she started checking the locks more often after that. So did I. The next envelope came 3 days later. Your route is predictable. This one was under my windshield wiper when I came out of the hardware store. I stood in the parking lot, looking around, trying not to look like a frightened old man, and saw nothing but strangers minding their own business. That night, the car idled outside our house again. But this time it stayed longer. 10 minutes. Maybe more. I didn't go to the window. I didn't want whoever was in that car to know I was watching. The sheriff took the notes seriously. He told me to vary my routine, take different roads, leave at different times, come home later or earlier, make it harder for anyone to predict where I'd be. I did exactly that. For a few days, the car didn't show up. Then I found the 3rd note. Better, but not perfect. That was when I started to understand something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't random. This wasn't someone trying to scare me for fun. Someone was studying me. The realization didn't come all at once. Came in pieces. Like noticing that the same car seemed to appear in different places no matter which route I took. Like realizing that the nights the car didn't idle near my house were the nights I stayed home and didn't go anywhere. Like understanding that the accident might not have been an accident at all. I went back to the intersection where it happened. There's a stop sign there. Clear view of the road. No trees. No blind corner. You'd have to be blind or drunk to miss it. Or you'd have to not care. I asked the sheriff if they'd found anything new about the other driver. He said no. Then he asked me something that made my skin crawl. Did you know you weren't the first crash at that intersection this year? I didn't. He told me there had been 2 others. Both late at night. Both hit and runs. Both with the other driver disappearing. Neither victim died. But one of them had moved away afterward. The other one had stopped driving entirely. Do you think it's the same person? I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just said, I think someone is practicing. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off and the curtains open, watching the road. Around 2:40 a.m., the sedan appeared. This time it didn't stop on the shoulder. It slowed down as it passed my house. Very slowly. Then it kept going. 5 minutes later, I heard another car. Not slowing. Not stopping. Just driving. I waited until the sound was gone. Then I looked at my phone. There was a new message. From a number I didn't recognize. Too many witnesses. Next time. I showed that message to the sheriff the next morning. That was the day they finally admitted something I already knew. They had no idea who was doing this. No plates. No usable camera footage. No pattern they could pin down beyond rural roads. Late at night, predictable drivers. I asked him why me. He said, because you were easy to predict. I stopped driving after that. At least I tried to. My wife did most of the errands. Friends helped out. For a while, the notes stopped. The car stopped showing up. Life started to feel almost normal again. Almost. Then one afternoon, about 2 months later, my wife didn't come home. She was supposed to be back by 6. By 7, I was calling her phone. By 8, I was in my car, driving the roads she usually took, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep them on the wheel. I found her pulled over on the side of the highway. Alive. Shaking. She told me a car had been following her. Staying just far enough back to be subtle. Then getting closer. Then backing off again. Like it was testing how she'd react. She said it turned off right before town. In the mailbox that night, there was one last envelope. This one wasn't the target. We moved a month later. Different state. Different town. Different routines. As far as I know, no one ever caught the person who caused those crashes. Sometimes I read about hit and runs in rural areas and wonder if it's the same person. Sometimes I think about the note that said my timing was consistent. And sometimes, late at night, I still imagine a car idling in the dark, waiting to see who's predictable enough to practice on next.